Hello and welcome to Climate Watch. I'm Fei Fei. As China pledges to cut its carbon emissions by up to 10% by 2035, covering all greenhouse gases, it's more crucial than ever to look beyond carbon dioxide, because CO2 isn't the only culprit. There's methane, nitrous oxide, and fluorinated gases. Many of them can trap far more heat than carbon dioxide. That means our mitigation efforts need to reach across a broader range of sectors, for example, agriculture. I recently attended the World Agri-Food Innovation Conference in Beijing, an event that brought together scientists, policymakers, and industry leaders from around the world. Their focus was, of course, on agriculture and food systems. But actually, climate adaptation was front and center among their agendas. Under the theme of building resilience, participants discussed the challenges the agri-food sector faces in a changing climate and how it can also be part of the solution. For example, Professor Zheng Dawei from the China Agriculture University, when speaking at one of the sessions, noted that while warmer temperatures can bring some benefits, such as longer growing seasons and expanded farming areas, the challenges that come with them are far greater.
在地质史上，每一次这个冰期
In geological history, each time an interglacial cycle occurred, the warming phase happened very rapidly, while the cooling phase was relatively gradual and fluctuating. This serves as a warning to us. The current rate of greenhouse gas increase may be faster than anything seen in hundreds of thousands of years, and if we cross certain critical tipping points, the changes could become irreversible.
那么气候变化对农业系统的影响呢？
Climate change affects agricultural systems in many ways, including extreme weather events, changes in natural resources and environment, shifts in pests, diseases, and their natural enemies, as well as changes in market demand. It also indirectly impacts agriculture through related secondary and tertiary industries.
Here in China, Zheng Dawei pointed to recent devastating weather events that are threatening our food supply. For instance, the impacts of typhoons have expanded into inland areas. Increased CO2 levels are reducing protein contents in crops and suffocating fish in waters. And notably, northern China is getting wetter with more frequent and intense rainfall. If you've spent this past summer in Beijing, you've probably noticed it yourself. But it's not all doom and gloom. Zheng Dawei also highlighted several examples of how China is adapting to these changes.
这个华北的冬小麦适当的晚播。
In North China, sowing winter wheat a bit later and harvesting summer maize a bit later. This too-late technique has significantly increased yields by making good use of climate warming. As the climate has warmed, it's become more difficult to grow cotton in eastern plains due to worsening pest and disease problems. As a result, the main production area has shifted westward to Xinjiang, which now accounts for 90% of China's cotton output. And the quality is excellent. There are many more examples like this. I've just picked a few here.
Looking ahead, the professor called for more nationwide projects, such as diverting water resources among regions, expanding the use of machinery in farming, and increasing the use of technology, including refining agroclimatic zoning to improve efficiency. He emphasized the current pace of climate change has surpassed the natural adaptive capacity of plants and animals, which is exactly why humans must step up and help accelerate adaptation efforts. At the same event, I also had the chance to sit down with one of the world's leading agriculture experts, Fan Shenggen. He's the chair professor and dean of the Academy of Global Food Economics and Policy at China Agriculture University. Before joining the university, Fan Shenggen served for a decade as the Director General of the International Food Policy Research Institute. With his extensive experience both in China and internationally, Fan shared his insights on agriculture, farmers' development, the deep connections between food and health, and also how to make a low-carbon transition in the agriculture sector, both here in China and around the world. I learned that your team has released a report called the China and Global Food Policy Report, and I'm very curious about that report. So can you share with us some of the key findings, especially when it comes to agri-food system here in China? What strikes you the most in terms of low-carbon transition?
Yeah, so our China Global Food Policy Report has been published for 5 years now, starting from 2021. Then 2022, 2023, 2024, and 2025. So fifth year, or 2025 report, very much focused on low carbon transition of agri-food systems. So several findings. One is the emissions from agri-food system is large, substantial, significant. So if we don't do anything, then the agri-food system will remain a major contribution to climate change, whether it's a global level, even here in China. So even in China, it also accounts for more than 10% of the national greenhouse gas emissions. As you know, President Xi Jinping announced that we needed to cut down, even after carbon peak, China still has to reduce the emission by 7 to 10% by 2035. So agriculture, food must be part of that. That's number one finding. Number two finding is, if we make positive changes, we will be able to help to reduce carbon emissions and help the overall national carbon neutrality goal. So what should we do? One is obviously investing in agriculture science and technologies. So some of the technologies will be able to help to reduce carbon emissions. So for example, certain rice varieties, certain rice practices, for example, wet and drying alternation in irrigation, and then the reuse of the straw, rice straw, for fertilizer or even for biofuel or for energy production. And then the more precision use of fertilizers. So all this will be able to reduce the methane emission or carbon emission substantially. Livestock is another major emitters of greenhouse gas emissions. But through appropriate feeding practice and by supplemental some of the components into feed, help to manage the manure more efficiently. So all this will help to reduce the emissions from the livestock sector. So then energy, more use of renewable energy in food and agriculture, reduce food waste and loss, and the change our diets. So reduce the red meat consumption, increase plant-based food. So all this will be help to cut down the carbon emissions quite a bit. Now, food and nutrition security for China, China's challenge is very different. But China basically has solved the hunger problem. There's no hungry people. But there are people who lack micronutrients, key micronutrients, iron, zinc, vitamin A. So to do that, the people need to consume more diverse, healthy, nutritious food, more beans, more fruits, more vegetables, and whole grains, so not overly processed foods. So all this will help to increase the micronutrients intake of our population. Then overweight, obesity is another challenge. So hunger is gone, micronutrient deficiency is there, overweight, obesity there. So what should we do? Promote healthy and nutritious diets, to educate consumers, to make sure that poor people can be helped either by government policy, social protection programs, or education, so they can access to healthy and nutritious foods. Overweight, obesity, obviously, better education, better exercise, and we should have a national campaign to really make sure that either undernutrition, that is undernutrition of the micronutrients, and overnutrition can be tackled at the same time.
That's a very packed answer, and I want to sort of digest that little by little. And the first question that I have is coming back to the balance between achieving our climate goals in the agri-food system and also, make sure our food security is not threatened. How do you see that balance can be achieved?
Right. Well, I think one is the policy side. So the policy right now is designed to support more production. As I said, food security, particularly hunger, has already been solved.
Here
in China, right? Globally, yes, there are some hungry people in Africa, in Southeast Asia, right? So China, basically, hunger is solved. Now, for China, as I said, if we can reuse our money, repurpose our money to support the production of more healthy, nutritious food, fruits, vegetables, beans, and so on, dairy products, instead of more rice, more wheat. So that's in China. But for Africa, I think the top priority is food security, because the carbon emissions there, compared to other countries, is relatively low. Africa is also a victim of the climate change. They contribute relatively small share. So the top priority is food security. How to do it? So obviously investment in agriculture research, make sure that smallholders can access to imports, can access to markets. Here, I also want to mention that China and Africa, how China can work with Africa to improve their productivity, improve their food security. Maybe in the future, Africa could also export food to China.
So you think international cooperation will be essential in a way?
That's right. So international collaboration, one is at global level, FAO, the United Nations, or the CGIAR, the Global Agriculture Research System, they must work together. And then also country to country, China to African countries, China to Latin American countries, China to Central Asia, to South Asia. So working together at country level, in addition to global level, could all help a collaboration and a partnership. So let's work together to produce more and produce better food. Meantime, through trade, we can share.
And another quite, I think, controversial topic here is when it comes to increasing yields on certain crops and certain food products. We do see these contrasts between really large-scale agricultural companies with smallholder farmers. So how do you see, especially here in China, how do we make sure that we are sort of helping with smallholder farmers?
Right. So this is not unique in China. So the large companies monopolize the big share of production, trade, marketing. So for smallholders, they must be organized. So for example, at the village level, maybe even higher level, the farmers can form collectives or associations, so they have more bargaining power. They can also work together to share the technology, to improve the efficiency, to specialize, let's say, their production. So the smallholders must be organized. That's one. Then big companies could also work with the smallholders through contracts, sign a contract with the collectives for marketing, input provisions, and even for trade. So in this case, smallholders will be able to enjoy the access to markets, access to technology, access to financial services, even beyond. And so basically, the centralization versus decentralization. Centralization by big companies that provide services. Then decentralization means smallholders are organized. They can sign a contract with a big company. So in that case, they have more bargaining power.
So do you see in China, we do have a lot of smallholder farmers here. And do you see China would be a very good example for other countries to learn?
Yeah, well, China is already happening in China. For example, in many parts of the country, the smallholders now have put their land together and to give it to the village. Let the village manage the land. But smallholders still have the ownership. But the village, that's a village association or village economic entity, help to manage that land. So then they can improve the efficiency, can use machines because the scale is larger. They can use even AI, modern technology, professional service to help them.
So when they are collaborating together, the big and small ones, can they sort of form a coalition towards our climate goals in contribution to that?
Yeah, well, I think obviously, when the farmers are organized or move towards bigger scale, they are more efficient. They also reduce carbon emissions. We have very strong evidence to show that if farmers work together to increase their scale, their size, the efficiency will improve, the carbon emissions will go down. But I think in addition to that, the government should also help to compensate the collectives or smallholders who help to reduce carbon emissions. Pay them.
Then on the other side, we do hear stories about, for example, internationally, not only here in China, this opposition against certain agricultural companies, especially in livestock, about their greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah, I think it really depends on the country. So many countries begin to encourage large-scale livestock sector to adopt new technology like AI, 牧羊, we just from 牧羊. So they wanted to promote AI using facial recognition, using digital tools to improve the efficiency. So when they improve efficiency, lower down the cost, so then the emission will come down. So now the question is whether they can work with smallholders. Let smallholders also link to their technology. So Moyang can provide technical services to smallholders, and then market services. So Moyang can purchase animals. There are some very large-scale animal production, but there are also many sort of centralized service, but decentralized production. So centralized service, you centralize market service, financial service, and technical service, but in the meantime, production is done by smallholders. It's already going right now, but we need to promote more, make sure that this sort of arrangement will help to increase smallholders' income, will be able to reduce carbon emissions. But there are some evidence to show that that model has potential to reduce carbon emissions because it has become more efficient, improve feed-meat ratio, and to improve the manure management.
Right now, we are. The last question would be more on China focused. Is that how do you see China's transition over the next 5 years, probably in the agri-food system? Do you see major changes, and what direction of low carbon transitions?
Yeah, I think we already have a vision where we want to go. So our food systems must produce healthy, nutritious foods, must transit to low carbon, and must help to protect the natural resources, must make sure that smallholders will benefit, make sure that consumers will have access to healthy, nutritious, and affordable foods. So this sort of vision or goals are clear. And the question is, how do we move to implementation? I think the government policy is, how can we use the government support, the financial resources, to support all these 4 or 5 goals? And these 5 goals are not against each other. We should achieve these goals at the same time. So that's why our research, analysis, and to understand the different stakeholders' interest will be so critical.
Mm-hmm. So what do you see can you give us a more example when it comes to...
Yeah, for example, subsidies, right? So support for grain production. If we remove the grain production, maybe some smallholders may suffer because some smallholders produce grains for their income. But reducing subsidies for grain production and use that money for innovation or use that money to change consumers' behavior may benefit overall society. Unfortunately, some small group of people will suffer. So is it possible for government to use income transfer to protect these people may potentially lose? So overall society will benefit. Maybe it's 100 million, but this small group of people may lose maybe only 1 million. But overall it's a positive. But that small group who lose 1 million will not like the policy. So how do you balance that to compensate the losers? This is so critical. That's our new understanding, and that's also the policy recommendation we made.
I do have one very last question. When you were in the International Food Policy Research Institute, I read one of your panels that you said the agri-food system is certainly overlooked when it comes to global governance or a lot of discussions. That's been 5 years ago. So have you changed your...
Yeah, I think we made some progress. The United Nations Food System Summit was held in 2021. Then after that, there were two follow-ups, so-called stock taking, one in Rome, one in Addis Ababa. So the awareness of food systems concept has been recognized and more recognized, but more needs to be done. So awareness, vision is vision, strategy, but actual implementation is critical. So for example, how do we repurpose subsidy? How do we educate farmers? How do we educate consumers? How do we work with the private sector to implement what we have discussed is lacking. It's not there yet. So some progress, but more needs to be done.
A huge thank you to Professor Fan Shenggen for sharing his insights. And thank you for listening to this episode of Climate Watch. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a friend. And as always, you can reach me at fei.fei@cgtn.com or find me on my Substack newsletter, Rivers and Mountains. Until next time.